Good evening, one and all, and welcome to the 20th Hindu-Christian Dialogue for Fellowship. This evening, we are so delighted to have His Eminence, Dr. Baselios Cardinal Cleemis, to speak to us on Sages and Saints, Archbishop Mar Ivanios, and the session will be moderated by Dr. Ashok Alur. Before we hand over the session to Dr. Ashok Alur, I would like to introduce to you Dr. Ashok Alur. He is presently Director at Center of Excellence for Farmer Producer Organizations, an Institute of Government of Karnataka in collaboration with Department of Horticulture and University of Horticulture Sciences, Bagalkot. He received PhD in agriculture from US, Dharwad, India. He has more than 20 years of experience in agriculture, higher education, international cooperation, natural resources management, Farmers Institute, etc. He held different positions in Swiss Agency for Development Cooperation, International Crops Research, Institute for Semi-Arid Tropics, and University of Horticulture Sciences, Bagalkot, and also served as Vice Chancellor at Anantapur, Andhra Pradesh. Currently serves as the Director, Center of Excellence for Farmer Producer Organizations. Dr. Ashok had received many prestigious awards, including honors from Ecumenism for his contribution to reduce poverty, malnutrition, environmental degradation, honorary recognition, FCRI from Thailand, honorary credentials from China, honors from government of Mozambique and Swaziland, Sarvatam Seva Award, Science Communications Award, and Independence Day honors from government of Karnataka. Dr. Ashok Alur has served as honorary expert for the food security programs of Mozambique and Swaziland. He is also a member of Regional Committee of UNDP, GEF, Israel Technology Committee, and many other reputed organizations. It's a joy for us to have a very dynamic scholar to moderate this session. We now hand over the time to Dr. Ashok Alur. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Minlunji. Thanks for your kind words about me. It's indeed a great pleasure to be part of this, Hindu-Christian dialogue for fellowship, jointly organized by the ECC, Office for Ecumenism Dialogue, CBCI, Ramakrishna Mission, and Focolare, movement. And today we have with us one of the most renowned and a wonderful personality, uncomparable in his contribution to the society. It is none other than His Eminence Dr. Baselios Cardinal Cleemis. And he's going to talk to us about another great personality who has left behind his, historical footprints in the society. He has left his, unforgettable moments in the hearts of the people, especially in the southern part of India. He is none other than Archbishop Mar Ivanios. So in this great occasion, Father Matthew requested me to moderate this session. I really take it as a great honor. See, we are listening to a great personality, a great saint, a great sage of the Indian subcontinent, and about whom another greatest saint is talking about. So there cannot be any other, what I should say, the pleased moment than this. So before we listen to His Eminence, I would like to make a brief introduction about the great speaker. And this is this is also my, it's an honor, great honor to me to introduce His Eminence Dr. Baselios Cardinal Cleemis. He is the major Archbishop Catholics of Syrio-Malankara Catholic Church. He is the first Cardinal of Syro-Malankara Catholic Church. Is born on 15th of June 1959 in Mokkur, that's the current Malapalli, and then in Kerala. And he was obtained a priest on 11th June 1986. Further, he completed in his doctorate in ecumenical theology from Pontifical University of St. Thomas Aquinas in Rome in 1997. On his return from Rome, he became the Vicar General of the Eparchy of Bethany. Pope John Paul II nominated him as Apostolic Visitor and the Auxiliary Bishop of Trivandrum on June 18, 2001 for the Syrio-Malankarites residing in North America and Europe. He was further, consecrated as bishop on August 15, 2001, assuming the name Isaac Mar Cleemis. He was further, His Eminence was further elevated to the College of Cardinals of Catholic Church by Pope Benedict XVI on November 24, 2012. As a cardinal priest, he was assigned to the titular Church of San Giorgio VII. He is the first bishop of the Syro, Malankara Church and the fifth Keralite to be named as cardinal. On 31st of January 2013, he was appointed by the Pope Benedict XVI to serve as the member of congregation for the Oriental Churches and the Pontifical Council for interreligious dialogue. He is the permanent member of Synod of Bishops, Rome. He is also the member of Executive Committee of Federation of Asia Bishops Conference and the executive member of the Peace Committee, Trivandrum. His Eminence is also the member of the National Integration Council, chaired by the Prime Minister of India. This is another greatest honor for his, personality. He served as the President of Catholic Bishops Conference of India from 2014 to 2018, and previously served as the chairperson of Kerala Catholic Bishops Council. His Eminence has been a great writer. He has published several books in both Malayalam and in English. He has received several awards, just to name a few, such as, Global Excellence Award by Kerala Kala Kendram, Nirappal Religious Harmony Award, Chamber of Excellence Award by the Chamber of Commerce of Trivandrum for imparting quality education in Trivandrum and its vicinity. He has also received the award of St. Jude Charitable Trust Award, Maranmore Cyril Baselios Catholics Award for eminent personalities, in recognition of his contribution in social and cultural sectors. So there are several other awards, have been honored on him in recognition of his great contribution to the society, the upliftment of the poor people, people at the lowest strata of the society. And I am short of words to, describe his contributions, his, services to the society. And it is a great, I should say, it's a great occasion for all of us to listen to such a great person. Now I would submit my request to His Eminence, Dr. Baselios Cardinal Cleemis, to, kindly take over and give us the great contributions of Archbishop Mar Ivanios.
Thank you, Dr. Ashok, for your gracious and magnanimous respect given to me And also, we appreciate your keen attention on the field of dialogue between communities and people. Father Matthew, I'm grateful to you for having invited me to share with you what my predecessor of great memory, Archbishop Ivanios, the servant of God, has contributed towards the building up of a community in dialogue. I gladly remember my 30-day stay in Whitefield, the Ecumenical Center, in the year 1988, as I was doing my master's at Dharmaram College, Bangalore. I had the privilege of staying with great people who are interested in the ecumenical dialogue and praying together, discussing, playing, interacting, and in fact, living as agents of dialogue. It gives me a homecoming again, though it is a virtual platform. I see the Ecumenical Center at Whitefield contributing much to come closer and get to know what is the best found in everyone and every community. Father Matthew, thank you, appreciate you, your service in the field of ecumenism, and you are continuing what you have been doing even at the time of your studies in Dharmaram College. For your information, he was a brilliant organizer as he was a student at Dharmaram College, and getting great people to the college. And we were lucky to have great speakers sharing with us on various subjects and discussing notable issues and concerns. With that, I thank you all for your goodness in being together to listen on great people who lived in our globe, who shaped the destiny of our history from different perspectives. And I am given such a topic on a wider umbrella, remembering sages and saints, including a great personality, the servant of God, Archbishop Ivanios. Ivanios is the Greek version of John. And the title which I gladly propose for this evening, and the reflection what we are going to have is building a community in dialogue. The title could be very well fitting to this great man on his contribution towards his community, building a community in dialogue. Life and work of servant of God, Archbishop Ivanios. Men and women achieve greatness in different ways, and only a few of them are made great by their birth or circumstances. Most of them tread the path of greatness by living their lives faithfully as a mission through patient endurance, sense of determination, and spirit of sacrifice. They shape history to a great extent than being shaped by it. The life of servant of God, Archbishop Ivanios, the founder of the Syro-Malankara hierarchy, and the proponent of a successful movement of reunion among the Orthodox Syrians of Kerala, certainly belongs to this latter group. I have a brief life sketch of this personality, which I would be reading. I hope which will help you to understand this background and also the hard work and the destiny brought through this great man. Ivanios was born in 1882 in a middle-class Syrian Christian family following the Jacobite faith. P.T. Gregorios was his name before he became a bishop. At the time of his birth, his church was undergoing a troublesome phase of history. Some Anglican missionaries had reached out to the community which he belongs to at the beginning of 19th century with the aim of building common areas of worship and witness. But many of the Anglican ideas regarding Christian faith were not acceptable to the traditional Jacobite understanding of it. 4 decades into the 19th century, the Jacobite community entered their cooperation with the Anglicans. But a group within the ranks of the Jacobites was attracted to some of the Anglican ideals, and they demanded a reform within the church. Finally, through a very painful process of separation, the reformed group was expelled from the community, and the church had to go into civil courts, litigations with this group of the possession of churches and properties. During his childhood and early education as a cleric, P.T. Gregorios knew the pain of division within the church. The year he entered into life as a priest was also the year a new leadership emerged within the Jacobite community in India. Gregorios Mar Ivanios, who became bishop in 1908 and the head of the community in 1909, was a personal mentor and guru to Father P.T. Gregorios. Some unfortunate events unfolded subsequent to the elevation of Mar Ivanios as the Metropolitan of Syrians. The Patriarch of Antioch, who was the spiritual head of Jacobites all over the world, had some differences of opinion with the new Metropolitan regarding the autonomy of the church in Kerala. The Patriarch expelled the Metropolitan, and the Jacobite community in Kerala split into 2 in 1910. Father P.T. Gregorios stayed loyal to his master in that difficult period and played a pivotal role in making sure that the group that supported Mar Dionysius could eventually become an autonomous church. These events provoked further disputes and civil litigations. In spite of his loyalty to Mar Dionysius, Father P.T. Gregorios was deeply pained by divisions and quarrels that were going on in the church. So when an opportunity came for him to serve as a professor in the University of Serampore near Calcutta, he accepted it. But he also wanted to initiate a transformation within his community through education of its clergy and committed lay men and women. Together, they formed a spiritual fraternity, and Father Gregorios and his fellow clerics took care of their spiritual needs. The girls were sent to Baselios in West Bengal, where under the tutelage of Sister Edith Landgrave of the Epiphany congregation, and they pursued private schooling. The experience in Serampore University helped Father Gregorios into introspect into the spiritual crisis of his own community. He describes his agony vividly in his autobiography named Giri Deepam. That is, the literal meaning is mountain torch. He realized that lack of commitment in working for the spiritual uplift of others was the basic reason behind that crisis. For that purpose, the best way was to start a community of people who have a communion with God, namely a monastic order. With this in mind, he left Serampore in 1919 and founded an ashram known as Bethany, which was profoundly based on values of Indian sannyasa at Perunad near Rani, the central Travancore. A religious order for women, Bethany sisters, who shared the same ideals of life, followed in 1925. In 1925, he was raised to the status of a bishop in the Jacobite Church. He assumed the name of Apostle John in its Syriac form, Ivanios, at his consecration as bishop. Working relentlessly for the spiritual reform of the community and for the promotion of all, he came to the understanding that a true solution to the problem of divisions and litigations within the church cannot be achieved without opening the community to a universal community of faith and worship. He realized that the best visible realization of such communion is in the Catholic Church. He attempted to guide the minds of his fellow bishops in the metropolitan fraction of the Jacobite community in this direction. And when those efforts proved fruitless, he and his loyal collaborator, Bishop Theophilos, reunited with the Catholic Church on 20th September 1930. In 1932, as many Jacobites followed Ivanios into the Catholic Church, the Syro-Malankara Catholic Church was recognized by the Holy See of Rome as a unique and autonomous way of embodying Catholic faith and worship. Ivanios became its first head and as such the Metropolitan Archbishop of Trivandrum. After building up a community which realized his dreams of peace and evangelical openness through untiring work of 21 years, the beloved Archbishop was called for eternal reward on 15 July 1953 and entombed at St. Mary's Cathedral, Pattam, Trivandrum. And presently, the Holy See of Rome has declared him as a servant of God, and he is now in the phase of the second phase of the canonization in the Roman office. I would like to recall what we have began with, building a community of dialogue. And this great man, Ivanios, was always a man of dialogue. Dialogue within the church, dialogue with the other people of different faith, dialogue with the nation, dialogue with the cultures, and so to say, and a permanent dialogue with God himself. That's what we always say, prayerful moments. He's a man of harmony. One event in the life of Ivanios, which can be seen as a prophetic sign, happened during one of the most difficult junctures of his life. In the aftermath of his decision to reunite with the Catholic Church, Ivanios and his followers had to leave the ashram and property in his ashram in Perinad, Rani. These places may not be known to you. These are the local villages in Kerala, and you need not worry about those names. But the message is that he left everything in the ashram and he walked to the destiny as an orphan. He had the property of, the ashram had the property of 400 acres of plantation. You must be surprised to listen to that he left everything and he proceeded further. So some of his companions, the ashramites, one young ashramite asked him, Guru, Abo, that is the master, where are we heading to? And he said, the Lord will show the path. We came here with empty hands, and now we go back the same, but the Lord will lead us. So therefore he had to leave the ashram, and his metropolitan and mentor and his beloved Guru, Mar Dionysius, the metropolitan of the Orthodox Church at that time, had issued a rather harsh disavowal of Ivanios and his initiative, asking the churchmen to resign from any help or kind of gesture towards him. As they were still waiting for the final formal recognition of reunion from Rome, they had nowhere to go. They left the ashram, they didn't become Catholics, and we used to say, between sea and devil. And at this time, one Hindu local leader, Varikamala Narayana Vaidyar, this is typical Malayalam name, a local Hindu nobleman came forward to purchase 4.5 acres of land to set up a new Christian ashram, a monastery over there. And the local community, predominantly Hindu, helped the ashramites, providing for their day-to-day needs. Ivanios did certainly repay his debt to this Narayana Vaidyar later, but at that particular moment, The welcome they received at Vernikulam was a reassuring sign for Ivanios, the man who left his home community with empty hands in search of truth, was being welcomed with open hands into the wider society. A man of harmony. That was the background of his journey as a Catholic. That kind of a reassurance was certainly worthy of the kind of person Ivanios was. He was a man of unity and dialogue, a priest of God who was truly inspired by universal dimensions of fraternity established by divine will. In ecclesiastical history, he may be generally noted as a bishop who worked to attain wider unity within the local Christian community that was troubled with the factional feuds. But that effort, with all its historical magnitude, was still only a reflection of his deeper spirituality, which sought harmony with nature and wider human society to fulfill the will of God, creator of all. The particular charism of him was abundantly manifest in his ministry as a priest, especially as we pay close attention to two of his most important phases. Ivanios as a monastic founder and as a bishop in the church. The title of our reflection is Building Community in Dialogue. The monastic founder. Ivanios was the first one to initiate a monastic foundation in the Jacobite Church in India. This monastic foundation was named Bethany after the biblical village where Jesus Christ was many times received as guest. It was his awareness that the church has failed in its spiritual call, the one of the working for the spiritual progress of others, that inspired Father Gregorios to found a monastic order while he was working in Sarampur. One of the major reasons for this failure, according to him, was that Christianity remained foreign in many respects in our land, even 19th centuries after its arrival. One of the early versions of the rules of the new congregation, it is specifically said, they intend to imitate our Lord through the adaptation of Indian ways of life. Edward Hamby, S.J., a great scholar from Belgium on the history of Indian church, observes that it was for the first time that since denominally a serious attempt was made to identify Christian faith, religious life with the Indian sannyas. His handbook for the monks of Bethany testifies how deeply he inculturated was the language and culture adopted by the early ashram. This was possible because before formulating his rules and basic ideal for his monastery, Father P.T. Gregorios visited Sabarimala of Mahatma Gandhi, Shanti Niketan of Rabindranath Tagore, and many other prominent ashrams in North India to study their lifestyle and organizations. The Syrian Christians, in spite of their loyalty to the Syrian's liturgical tradition are a deeply inculturated people in the day-to-day worship. For example, they remove their sandals before entering the place of worship and make a profound bow with folded hands as a mark of reverence. In Bethany, this became more pronounced, especially in the early practice of meditation, contemplative posture, and in some internal arrangements of the place of worship. Certainly, the way a monk dressed and presented himself was a more visible element. In a letter written 2 years before the foundation of the Bethany Ashram, Father Gregorios asked the permission of his metropolitan to make saffron the regular attire of his monks. He indicates that the attire should be something gives a sense of separation and mission, yet something that allows the monk to blend into the society. I quote, "It should be something that is suitable to India, suitable to this land. Nobody should blame us of being styled after some foreigners. It should be also be something least expensive. It should be something esteemed both by Hindus and Muslims as something suitable for the work of God." He proceeds to suggest a simple white cassock dyed in a saffron, with which was a common practice among Hindu ascetics. It is likely that he also found continuity between Syrian monasticism and Indian sannyasa in the practice of growing beard. The final addition of the attire was a wooden cross attached to a saffron color thread worn around the neck, while proclaiming aloud the Christian identity of the wearer. Its making also reminded one of his deeply Indian heritage. You must be interested to know that the cross which I wear today is of 90 years old, which was used by the fellow monk of Ivanios in the Bethany Ashram as they were living as monks in the monastery. So this gives me a great closeness with Ivanios and his monastic life in the ashram. In addition to this all, the early rules of ashram required the inmates to include sacred books of Hindu tradition in their personal study. The aim was to inculcate in them a sense of respect for the major religious tradition of the land. Ivanios himself used to study Ramayana and Bhagavad Gita with attention in those early days. Some of the details of the ashram life I simply omit for the sake of saving time, and I hope that you will get a copy of the whole text. For Matthew, they will all get a copy of the presentation later, no?
Yes, Your Eminence, we will send them. Yes.
Well, good. So, thank you. And the blessedness of life in the ashram naturally flowed out into its surroundings, both as a spiritual awakening among the Orthodox community and as a witness to the gospel through the love and service of human being in need. Bethany was right from the beginning being described as a charitable institution by its founder. It was not conceived as a monastic compound, an orphanage, a hospice for the poor, a dispensary, and schools were already in the original blueprint. And an article published in the Daily of Kerala Malayalam Manorama on the days of its inauguration mentions an even more ambitious project. It was to include a training college for missionaries and a teachers training college as well. You must remember, this intention was in 1915, years back. A teacher, a monk, a Christian leader wishing to start a place of prayer, intending to serve the community around him with a deep sense of education, empowering the poor, and sharing the gospel. Those were the times when pilgrimage to Sabarimala, the Hindu forest sanctuary, was much more challenging than the present day. You must be knowing that there is a famous Hindu shrine called Sabarimala, where thousands of Hindu faithful come and worship. And the pilgrimage involved trekking uncharted mountain paths, and one of the more recognized paths passed through the valley near the Bethany ashram. It was usual that the pilgrims fell ill and even died during the outbreaks of cholera or flu at that time. The ashramites not only tried to help those who were passing by, but also brought some of the gravely diseased to the ashram and took care of them until they got better. This was described in the autobiography of Ivanios. The girls who were studying in Baselios in West Bengal, in the meantime, returned with the two sisters of the Epiphany congregation and two teachers, all English ladies, who volunteered to help in an initiative in women's education. This was in 1920 and 30s. They reopened a girls' school in the central part of Kerala in Tiruvalla, which had gone into the dysfunction due to the opposition from the conservative elements in the community. Within a few years' time, they could make some progress. I should invite your attention to that period of time where education to women were not that much promoted. And to the record, Ivanios brought about 15 young ladies to Baselios and trained them in the university and brought them back in view of training further the women folk. So educating women was one of his great visions. A man who built up a community for further dialogue. We have seen him as a monastic founder. And our attempt now is to see him, his ministry as a bishop. Father Gregorios was consecrated on the 1st May 1925, and he received the regnal name Ivanios, commemorating of the apostle and the evangelist John. His episcopate was unique in many respects. He had all India jurisdiction, which permitted him to do his apostolic work even in localities that were already placed under other bishops. He did not owe his election to any of the two all-powerful administrative bodies of his church, the Episcopal Synod and the Managing Committee. He was the Bishop of Bethany of his religious order and all the people the order chooses to serve. This independence gave more purpose and clarity to Ivanios' work. It was also noted that he refused to recite a formula of exclusion directed at Catholic Church, which was part of the traditional Jacobite profession of faith as bishop. This event is very, very inspiring. At the time of his consecration as bishop, as part of the customary ritual, he had to renounce or he had to exclude direct Catholic teaching and the Pope's name of that particular time. And Ivanios declined to do that. And finally, the chief celebrant, the Metropolitan, yielded to his request and said, this may be a beginning of a history where we all could proceed better dialogue with all Christian communities. His speech after his installation as a bishop in 1925 highlighted an ecclesial vision of harmony and dialogue. He explained his refusal to cover his insignia, the pastoral staff, cross worn on chain, a handheld cross, all made of wood, with the gold as something suited to his status as a monk. He briefly narrated the reasons for the split in the church and explained from a historical standpoint the validity of his community's current status as an autonomous church. From there, he went straight away to express his desire to heal the wounds so that everybody can become part of one fraternity. This call for unity, which first appears as an invitation to the patriarch to accept the autonomy of the church and reconcile, which then takes form of an encouragement for the local heads of church to do everything they can to make reconciliation possible. Episcopate gave Ivanios more power of self-determination with regard to the missionary activities of Bethany. The parishes entrusted to the pastoral care of priests from the order, and from their place, they began the mission of preaching the gospel among the socially marginalized groups, and a few missions were established. The churches had particular system of administration, catechetical ministries aimed at special age groups, helped people to participate in worship more actively. Even before his Sarambur days, Ivanios had begun the work of translating the Syriac liturgical text into Malayalam, and the option for the local language became stronger in Bethany churches. Long time before the Second Vatican Council, where the translation of the liturgical books into the local languages was stressed, Ivanios had the privilege of translating the books in 1920s and 30s already. There were seeds of social transformation. On the one hand, the works by Bethany movement was drawing a generation out of spiritual stagnation. On the other, knowledge empowered them within the community and in their lives outside. At this juncture, direct involvement of Bethany in the Ministry of Education was limited, because through the work of founding schools was already done to a sufficient level in the last decades of 19th century. Within the context that Ivanios' work was more qualitative and seminal. His early commitment to higher education of priests and other committed youth, and while in Sarambur, brought a large number of highly qualified personnel to leadership roles within the community. His selective attention on women and people from other marginalized groups, while he was the father of Bethany movement, helped to make their voices to be heard in the community mainstream. His work of educating people in matters of faith and worship also moved their space in the community from that of passive observers to that of active participants. As the work progressed, two things happened. Ivanios' attention was turned to creating another kind of dialogue within the church. Correspondingly, more obstacles were placed before his work by people who were now getting upset with his independence and determination. His reunion as an exercise in dialogue. The most significant contribution of Ivanios for the history of the Orthodox community was opening a path of reconciliation with the Catholic Church. By 1926, there was much uncertainty within the faction that supported the Metropolitan Dionysius about the impending verdicts on key litigations with the other side. The Metropolitan himself suggested to Ivanios and his key collaborators the possibility of strengthening the community by uniting to one of the ancient Christian communities. Ivanios' studies in church history and his wide experience as a professor in Sarambur University had by then convinced him that the Catholic Church is the historical continuation of the one church founded by Christ. He was also convinced that there will not be true unity among Christians of Kerala, something he himself looked upon as ideal, without entering into the communion with the Catholic Church. He convinced the other metropolitans that there is a real possibility of being once again part of the Catholic communion without losing the autonomy of the Jacobite community. Christians of Kerala were once willingly part of the Catholic communion, and due to the atrocities done on them by the few Portuguese missionaries out of ignorance, in 1653, they declared independence from colonial rule. Right from the moment of separation, they made many efforts of reconciling with the Pope, with the condition that they should be granted autonomy with regard to customs of worship and pastoral care of their own people. That means they wanted to continue the Syriac tradition of worship and to have their own people at the leadership of the church. The missionaries who played the intermediary role in these attempts failed their efforts, their part, to keep their command over the community. That's how a part of those who took oath not to obey the Portuguese accepted the Jacobite faith and practice. Gradually, they came under the spiritual authority of the Patriarch of Antioch. In 1910, as we indicated at the beginning, the relationship with the Patriarch also reached a point of breaking up. The group under Metropolitan Dionysius was increasingly taking a stand of isolated autonomy in matters of ecclesial governance. Ivanios deeply appreciated the spirit of autonomy within the church. But as we saw in his speech after the consecration, he saw this autonomy meaningful only within the larger communion of the church. He was convinced that the isolated autonomy contemplated by many within the church will be spiritually dangerous. As his efforts to bring full reunion of his community with the Catholic Church were progressing, in 1928, a key verdict in the litigations came in favor of the faction that supported Dionysius. Emboldened by this success, the Episcopal Synod withdrew from their support to move of Ivanios. Convinced that he was moving in the right direction, Ivanios separated with his beloved mentor and became a Catholic on 20th September 1930. Except his loyal disciple Theophilos, no other bishop followed him. But many priests and the faithful who were spiritually connected to him through Bethany Ashram followed him into the Catholic communion. In a historical retrospect, the event of reunion in 1930 helps us to understand the essential dynamics of dialogical coexistence of traditions. Ivanios' success lay in the fact that he could convince the Catholic leadership of his time about the historical correctness and sincerity of the stand taken by the forefathers. Their request for autonomy in matters of worship and a validly established local leadership was totally justifiable. Once that point is recognized, Ivanios was ready to make sacrifices for the sake of unity. He knew his roots and respected them. But his self-determination and assertion was not confrontational. He espoused the divinely established order and harmony within the one church established by Christ as a value superior to any other historical prejudice and presumption. Certainly, during one of his important conversations during the stressful years of reunion, he would point out that historical prejudice and presumption are the human factors that contribute to divisions and quarrels within the church. His approach all through this process was marked with a deep respect for vital values represented by his community and also the values represented by Catholicism. But then, in order to make the reunion real, he had to make some sacrifices. Self-esteem, mutual respect, and spirit of charity are the essential components of any dialogue. A more fulfilled life. His life as a bishop and a monastic founder in the Jacobite community had its own blessings. But as a Catholic Archbishop of Trivandrum, we see him bringing his charisms to more powerful and marvelous realizations. The fundamental vision does not change. His resources now, humanly speaking, are more limited, but the work was swiftly bearing fruit to the marvel of everybody who witnessed it. It was a time when the Syrian Christian churches did not have much presence in the districts south to Pampa. When he became the Archbishop of Trivandrum, he had to start everything from the scratch. The bishops of the Syro Malabar Church certainly helped by sending qualified personnel, priests, seminarians, and religious to help him. The Archbishop used his personal charisma into the full in his visits the countries of strong Catholic heritage and could procure some financial help to begin his apostolic work. Key to the success of his apostolic work was the insight to use knowledge as a critical resource to bring about social transformation. To use knowledge as a critical resource to bring about social transformation. Even when the Archdiocese was struggling to find means to run its regular day-to-day business, like building places of worship, paying salaries to priests, he started many schools. In 21 years, he started as many as 72 primary schools, 19 middle schools, and 15 high schools. Asia's biggest school today is one among them, with 12,000 students in the same campus. 2 teachers training institutes were also founded. The crowning glory of his achievements in this field of education today is one of the foremost centers of higher education in Kerala, the Ivanios College in Trivandrum. The urgency he showed in founding educational institutions will amaze anyone who pays attention to the details. In 1930s, he risked losing control of his school, beloved girls' school in Tiruvalla. In May 31, he laid foundation for a new school, girls' school at Nangyarkulam. He was not the Archbishop of Trivandrum at that time. As a shepherd in the church, these educational institutions helped his outreach to the people of the land and helped the consolidation of the new communities. But as a Christian and a loving father, he will have derived equal amount of joy from the fact that thousands of lives changed, especially in the farthest corners of the civil districts of Koilon and Trivandrum. In the ecclesiastical circles, his work is also noted as one of the most successful missionary enterprises. But his focus was never on conversion or altering the culture people lived in. He had a sensibility to present his message without disturbing the cultural equilibrium of the land. In 1946, he writes in a pastoral letter, I quote, India has its religious life. It is an ancient tradition. The church should not destroy that tradition. On the contrary, it should accept from it whatever is good. And that is what is not against faith and morals, and Christianize it. Thus, we must prove that the Christian religion is not foreign to India, as many say, and that is above such national feelings, unquote. And the real success of that missionary enterprise was not in numbers, but the social mobility and economic progress it brought to a section of people largely neglected until then. In addition to the accessible institutions of education, healthcare was an important need in the southernmost part of Kerala and the Kanyakumari district of Tamil Nadu. Ivanios had already perceived that women could work more effectively in such circumstances. And he helped to found a new religious congregation of women to serve in those areas. With their help, he started numerous schools of primary and vocational education and community health centers. Around such services, people also began to come together to worship God, and new communities were formed. To get an idea of how socially integrated were these new Christians into mainstream church, it is enough to remember that the first candidate for priesthood from among them was ready for ordination by the time Archbishop passed away and later became a bishop. The rapid emergence of the new community in the capital city of Trivandrum happened during a time when one of the most anti-Christian rulers of Travancore state was in command. The Divan, the de facto ruler of the state at that time, was Sri C.P. Ramaswamy, who saw Christianity as a foreign religion and a threat. He did everything he could uproot the new archbishop from the capital and to block his activities in the wider extent of the state. Faced with immense pressure, Ivanios held fast to his own principles and could gain the trust and respect of the local people and the royal family as well. Gradually, the royal family became so friendly with him so that he could pay a visit to the palace unannounced. Nothing other than the depth of his conviction and his sincerity could have helped him to achieve that level of an access. Gradually, even the Divan learned to respect him. In a critical moment of conflict between the Divan and the entire Christian leadership, the Divan could have ordered the arrest of such a much venerated archbishop. It was the timely intervention of Ivanios and the trust he could gain from the government that saved the situation. When the Archbishop died in 1953, the king of that time issued the following message. I quote, "His death is not only a loss to the archdiocese, but it is also an individual loss to the members of my family and myself," unquote. To conclude, to speak of this great legacy, I must say, among the many Christian communities of Kerala, the Malangara Catholic Church is one of the youngest of that kind. And going by numbers, there are other churches that can claim to be larger. But the charism of Ivanios, his special gift of being a person who can assert himself sincerely and dialogically, has made this church the leading voice among the Christians by the time he passed away. The church continues his deeply inculturated way of Christian living and continues to bear witness to the gospel through its commitment to empowerment of the marginalized and an active life of charity. Gregorios, who succeeded Ivanios as the second Archbishop of Trivandrum, was instrumental in keeping the communal harmony of the state in balance in most explosive situations, like when Christians and Hindus confronted each other in the issue regarding the sanctuary at Nilakal, one of the places associated with St. Thomas, or when a communal right in Pundura in Trivandrum was threatening to attain explosive dimensions. I'm deeply grateful to the Almighty in being able to say with all humility that the church and the leadership and the entire people of God continue to inspire the same amount of trust and confidence among its neighbors, even today, believing that God will care for us. Thank you all. I know this was a hard time for you, concentrating on something or someone, some historical perspectives which are not familiar with you, but I appreciate your great interest in getting to know the sages and saints of our land who shaped the destiny of our culture and country. And also to add, the net result of these great personalities have brought to us a community in dialogue. A community is positively inviting everyone to respond and to dialogue further. All the questions will be answered by Father Matthew and Dr. Ashok.
With folded hands and bowed head, I extend all respects to His Eminence Dr. Baselios Cardinal Cleemis. He has enlightened us with his great, discourse on Archbishop Ivanios, the servant of God, who always believed in building a community in dialogue. Archbishop Ivanios is rightly revered as a prophet of unity. When we listen to his life sketch, he is nothing but a prophet of unity. He has been a great luminous figure of 20th century. He was endowed with rare and sterling qualities, both of mind and heart. He always believed that truth shall liberate anyone. And he also believes, if you look at the number of schools, colleges, educational institutions that has opened during his period, it very clearly indicates his belief that all-round upliftment of any human being or any society can happen only through education. So His Eminence was talking about number of schools, more than 70, 75 schools, colleges, and other educational institutions that he has started. And he has made his greatest service to the mankind by providing education to the people at the lowest strata of the society. The students, thousands of students, have studied in these educational institutions. People have occupied greatest positions and places in the society, and all credit goes to that luminous, visionary personality. And Bethany Ashram, His Eminence was talking about the establishment of Bethany Ashram by his Archbishop Ivanios, and which is, in the current situation, people respect that, go there. It is a place of pilgrimage for many people. People go there for spiritual experience, and it is another, the most holiest place for any person to go and visit these places. I think Your Eminence, you have enlightened us, and I'm sure all my brothers and sisters who are part of this dialogue, they will agree with me that we have been enlightened about a great social saint, a person, a mystic of 20th century, and you have really educated us. I would like to, I was just reading through his life sketch, and I was really touched by the last prayer, which Archbishop Ivanios composed. Oh no, it was to Our Lady of Sorrows, and Archbishop composed the following prayer in Syriac. I would like to just, read it before I stop. The prayer says, "O cloud that rained forth the dew of life, made through whose face the sun shines, who stands out the generations of earth and prevents darkness encompassing it. Central diamond set in the crown of Lord of heaven, who transmits the light of her sun to the four corners of the universe. Door unbuilt by hands, uncut by tools, closed forever, to whom the King of glory entered once. Mother in whose lap the sad finds the comfort, the sinner's hope, and the saints' ecstasy, pray for us." And if you look into the deepest meaning of this last prayer composed by Archbishop, it shows his commitment, his, dedication to the society. I think we are all blessed to learn about a great, mystic of 20th century, and through another great mystic, and we are blessed. And I would now request the great, I should say, the great listeners, people who have been part of this dialogue, would like to, if you have any, I cannot say questions, there can be some clarifications. If at all you want to add something more to the, the knowledge basket, the floor is open. I would request any of you to raise questions, queries, clarifications, more information. I think His Eminence will be more than pleased to share about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Your Eminence, yes, Caroline.
Yes, I put a question. I was wondering why he called the ashram Bethany. Was there any particular episode or story to that?
Bethany in the Bible, the meaning of the word is a house of consolation. This should be also understood in the context of that time, historically, when his own community was split into two, and there were litigations between the patriarch and the metropolitan, and everybody was seeking a solace and a consoling place to go and pray. So he found this name from the Bible, Bethany, where Jesus had his consoling time with Martha and Mary and Lazarus. So he said, this is the most fitting word and name to be taken for a religious house in Malankara. Therefore, he chose to include that name, Bethany.
Dr. Ashok, there is a question in the box by Cherryline. You can unmute yourself and you can read.
Thank you, Your Eminence, for presenting this prophet of unity who lived for the unity in a very difficult period of church history. Please, could you share with us how is his legacy of dialogue and unity being taken ahead, especially with the other fractions of Jacobite Church, for example?
Thank you for the question, which would really highlight the aftermath of this man's achievement and commitment. Naturally expelled from his own mother community, he had to face a lot of problems, being separated from his community and joining the Catholic Church at that time was not properly received. I must say it was not well received, and still it is in the process of being recognized and acknowledged. And I must say, honestly, there is a great progress in understanding of this legacy, this great man, of his commitment to bring dialogue and successful union attempt, and also dialogue with everyone in the society. So the two factions of the Jacobite Church, they are also trying to understand him, I must say, and acknowledging him much better than previously. That must be an honest attempt from my part to describe the present reception of this great man. We need to grow further.
Your Eminence, I have a question. It was a very brilliant and a very comprehensive presentation of Mar Ivanios, who was a great revolutionary as well as an intellectual, and how he was able to build from nothingness to create. So what I was touched by while your Eminence was sharing, 400 acres of land left, nothing was there, and Mar Ivanios did not take anything and left to nothing, and just believing in the providence of God, they went. And what kind of hope instilled in Mar Ivanios had the courage to go forward without anything but believing in that he will provide. So I think that was such a stirring moment for me, that believing in and hoping for. This is what I think for today's world we really lack, that hope. So could you, your Eminence, can explain, since you are sitting on the throne of Mar Ivanios, who stood there, and the other successors, and you are the one, and my senior at Dharmaram, and I have seen your courage and also the intellectual and this unity bringing through dialogue, your Eminence.
Thank you, Father Matthew. This, in fact, if you look at the life of Mar Ivanios from a closer point of view, you'll be able to know he was the first priest from the Malagra Church to obtain a master's degree at that time. Educated man, and then he was the principal of a leading high school in Kottayam. Kottayam is a town known for its literacy and so on. So he was the principal of a great school over there. All on a sudden, he resigned from that post and he left for West Bengal, the Baselios, to assume a new job. There he met a lot of Anglican missionaries and get to know them and their inspiring leadership on bringing dialogue and communion. And then at the peak of his career as a university professor in 1915, that time, then he slowly withdrew the whole career, resigned. He asked the permission of his metropolitan to come back to that forest area in Rani. He said he wants to start a monastery. He said he was in search of a life style which includes deep communion with God and missionary enterprises and evangelical commitment and dialogue with everyone. He said for that he needs a monastic ashram. Bethany was founded. Then he said it should be a missionary movement. He said we should go out and tell what we have experienced. And after that, he realized if this is to be practiced, it should not be in a local style. It should be part of a universal church. That urged him to be in communion with the whole universal Catholic Church. So you see, he was always ready to accept the will of God to proceed with the spiritual depth as I must say, as a guru and as a devotee. He, as I said, he reached Trivandrum. At that time, very few Christians of the Syrian Christian tradition, practically no church. You must be interested to know the first church he needed to announce that he is the new Archbishop in Trivandrum. He needed a church. So he purchased a cinema theater and converted into as a church. And there, this announcement was made. A man of heroic virtue, a man who could take any amount of risk, a man who was deep in his relationship with God. He said, God will provide everything. God will provide. And to conclude that note, he was in his deathbed for a long time after his treatment in St. Martha's, Bangalore, for a long time. He came back to the bishop's house in Trivandrum, and that time we had only two bishops, that the Archbishop of Trivandrum and the Bishop of Tiruvalla. So both planned to travel together from Bangalore to Trivandrum. Bangalore, Chennai, Chennai, Trivandrum. And at the time, the Bishop of Tiruvalla, the second bishop in the Malankara Catholic Church, when he was about to come to the airport, Ivanios said, no, you should not come with me at this flight. You should go by train. That time, the flight was not that available every day. No, he should go by train back to Kerala, because if something happens to the flight we travel, there won't be anyone left out. So you please come by train. A man who always thought of the church, and it was the time to ordain his auxiliary, Archbishop Gregorios, who many of you must be known to that fact. So he was really sick, but Ivanios said, I myself will ordain him. But it was a joke at that time, because this was not possible. A man who is at the deathbed, when so tired and so weak, we should realize he spent 3 hours of the consecration ceremony, and he did it. And after 3-4 months, he was called to eternal rest. So he believed fully in the providence of God, and everything was done in favor of him.
Thank you, Your Eminence.
Father Matthew?
Yes, Dr. Ashok. I think
any other clarifications?
I think maybe yes.
Maybe you can you may go ahead, Father, with some concluding points, and then we will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, Milun, would you like to say what is the next one?
The next lecture will be on Chaitanya Mahaprabhu by Swami Anantasera Das from ISKCON.
Your Eminence, it was such a wonderful, comprehensive, brilliant and experiential sharing about Mar Ivanios, though most of us heard about the name, but I think Your Eminence's sharing was so deep and so well connected, and we understood the whole dynamics and this intellectual, spiritual, social revolutionary, how he was able to build communities through dialogue. So in times of all problems, dichotomies, believing in the providence of God, his servant of God was able to build up communities from nothingness. Maybe as in the Catholic Church, we could say that ex nihilo. So therefore, I would say that he's such a, and also the way your Eminence has told us that he wanted to understand what is the monastic life in India. Therefore, visiting other great ashrams and the great saints, interacting with them and build up, and also having that saffron as a symbol of unity, renunciation, and a person of God. So I think these are all things which the Malankara Catholic Church is continuing. And I also heard from your predecessor, Baselios, who also said that he was once in Nagpur. So his Grace was telling me that many Catholic bishops were there, but the local people who are all Hindus coming and touching His Grace's feet. And then all the others looked at His Grace and said, "Why only to you?" Then it seems Baselios Pida said to them that, they only recognized me as a shepherd and a spiritual leader. All the others were with all the other paraphernalia, but the people sensed. And I think that today, as your Eminence is sitting on the same seat or the throne, and we are extremely happy. And I see that as my senior at Dharmara, I have seen how you courageous, how jovial, humorous, simple, and how we could relate. And I have seen and heard from many people that how you were building up, continuing this great tradition of building up communities through dialogue. And when your Eminence was called to be to the Rome as a cardinal, with the Muslims, with the Hindus, and then also the Hindu monks, and how you protested that only your Eminence will be allowed, nobody else, then I am not coming. Then that way, I think that how you were able to build up the unity as humanity. So we all appreciate. And I request Reverend Sugumar, who is my program executive here, to thank. And your Eminence, thank you so much for this wonderful talk. And we will send the article which your Eminence has written and convey to all others. Maybe the last as a word, your Eminence, we have a number of around 20 of them are taking this as a certificate course, and your Eminence would like to give a question so that they can write it around 400 words. It's all on a sudden I am asking your Eminence, but I think
now, or
you can give it now, because your Eminence, knowing everything, that's building community.
okay. So it should be a hard one, no? I should be.
They are all smiling. They are the people who are to write.
Just you can formulate the question, but the idea is this. So being someone who is responsible in building up a community of dialogue, how can I contribute to this noble objective? I say, we have heard building a community in dialogue, that was Archbishop Ivanios. That same perspective, how can you, being responsible to implement that objective? That's the concern I share with you. You can translate, you can formulate the question, and you can you yourself can write the answers as well. Whenever I come to Whitefield, I will have a further discussion on that.
Thank you, Your Eminence. Wonderful question, and I am absolutely sure that they will all appreciate. Happy to know that while Your Eminence was studying at Dharmaram, almost a month stayed here. So most welcome next time. And then, yeah, when the pandemic is over, I am sure that you will be able to. So now,
Matthew,
yes.
Matthew, that time I paid for 1 month stay in Whitefield, but this time when I come, it should be free, totally free.
Absolutely. Even for an year, Your Eminence can come and stay, not a month.
Thank you.
And one more promise from Father Matthew to me is that he will take me to Trivandrum.
Yeah.
Yes. So both of us will come together to Your Eminence, and then we can plan for, as he said, that FPO, Farmers Producers Organization. Definitely, we will build up for the poor.
Welcome, Dr. Ashok.
So over to Sukumar.
On behalf of all of us, I sincerely thank His Eminence, Dr. Baselios, Cardinal Cleemis. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much indeed, Your Eminence, for a stunning presentation on the theme Sages and Saints, Archbishop Mar Ivanios. We are extremely fortunate and delighted to have you as a speaker for this amazing webinar. You look so simple, yet your presentation is outstanding and groundbreaking research, which had inspired us to know more and more about the life of Archbishop Mar Ivanios. Your tone and voice modulation is extraordinary. You are an excellent speaker and inspirational leader. You won our hearts and minds by your presentation. We look forward to listen your wisdom more and more for the days to come, Your Eminence. We need leaders like you, Your Eminence. Thank you so much indeed. I also thank Professor Ashok Alur, sir, for moderating this webinar in a creative way. Thank you very much, sir. Despite your busy schedule, you have spent your time with us. It means a lot. We look forward to learn from you and work with you. Thank you very much indeed, sir. Thanks to our dynamic ECC director, Professor Father Matthew Chandran Kunil CMI, for bringing such a great and international leader and a Cardinal, His Eminence Dr. Baselios, Cardinal Cleemis, in our midst virtually. It's a great joy to listen and learn and interact with His Eminence Dr. Baselios, Cardinal Cleemis. Thank you very much, Father Matthew. Thanks to our Deputy Director, Mr. Thangmenlun Wepe, for his administrative and technical skills. Thank you very much indeed. I thank all the participants for your time to present in this webinar. Thanks to all of you. Thank you so much indeed.
Father Matthew, can I take 1 minute?
Yes, yes.
Thank you, Sukumar, for the kind words of appreciation and gratitude from your part. And I thank Dr. Ashok for the wonderful moderating role and all of you for your great attention. And I'm sure to most of you, this Mar Ivanios was someone new, and kindly pray for the success of his beatification phase in Rome, so that we have also a saint praying with us and praying to him. And thank you, Father Matthew, for the thoughtfulness that you have shared with me, that you remember that I am alive. That's why you called me, and then you asked me to have to this session with you. And really, it's a very rewarding time for me. And I have only one complaint about Sukumar. Father Matthew should correct him. He misunderstood me, that I am a simple man. So you should correct him. Yeah?
Yes.
You should tell him who I am. Huh?
I know how complicated you are, Your Eminence. I will tell you.
Thank you all.
So,
Thank you. God bless you. And whenever you get a moment, kindly say a prayer for me and for my intention. That will help me a lot to do something more for the Lord and his people. Bye-bye. God bless you.
Bye-bye.
Your Eminence.
Yes.
I have